Good afternoon. So on behalf of Amazon Web Services and IHL Group, I'd like to welcome you to this Big Ideas session. Our topic is POS in the cloud. So I'm Robbie Boggle. I lead Consumer Industries Business Development at Amazon Web Services. We have with us today Greg Buzak, President of IHL Group, one of the leading analyst firms in the country. And this is a topic that's really near and dear to both Greg and my hearts, I think. We both have a long heritage in point of sale. In fact, I'm kind of a child of point of sale. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. My dad worked at National Cash Register, NCR, back when they were headquarters there. And I remember my dad telling me when I was a teenager that one of these days we're going to live in this kind of magical checklist, cashless society where you'll walk into a store and pick up something and you're going to walk out and it's just going to be great. Now, putting this in context, my mom really liked the Jetsons because she also dreamed of having like a dishwashing robot. So I'm not sure that as a kid I really thought that any of that was really going to happen. You know, maybe somewhere on Mars in the year 2525. But if you stop to think about it, a lot of those ideas about the transformation and the change in the way that consumers shop and end up buying at the physical store have changed. Some of the most obvious examples are, for example, our Amazon Go experiment in Seattle, where you can walk in and walk out, and I think many of you must have seen that. But there's a lot more kind of obvious examples right in front of us. The whole idea of buy online, pick up at the store means that one of the core things that you used to do at a retail store, pay for the thing you just bought, kind of doesn't happen anymore. So that's true, that point of sale kind of has its heritage in a different era and a different time, and perhaps needs to adjust to the future. Does that create an opportunity for us? Does that create an opportunity to deconstruct the shopping experience, create a differentiated and a new way for consumers to interact with your brands? And what does that mean for the technologies that could support that? That's what Greg and I are going to talk about a little bit over the next 30 minutes. I'm going to give you my view of sort of the evolution, how we got here. And then Greg, as you know, does a lot of basic research to understand trends, what are other retailers doing, and in the context of changes in the industry. So he's going to share with you some very compelling data and interesting points around where we're going. We'll take a few minutes to have a chat at the end. So looking forward to this. And so let me start off by talking about sort of the history of point of sale. I mean, for those of you who remember, I mean, none of us really remember that cash register on the left, but the whole idea of the cash register started with a very simple premise. You needed to control cash. You needed to manage cash. It was primarily a security function, right? I mean, the cash drawer would kick and it would open and you'd put the money in and then you'd lock it. And then they sort of developed more advanced functionality like being able to count how much money was going to be there. And then the big revolution of paper receipts, right? That you could actually print, you know, what the receipts were and you'd actually have an accurate sense of what your day's sales were, and you could have an accurate ledger and so forth. Plus, they were a lot better looking, right? I mean, those cash registers, if you find them on eBay, they're worth a lot. If you happen to find a good one for me, I'd love one. So the cash register, as we knew it, in some form or another, kind of was the center of retail for a long time. And because you needed to have it, you needed to have a cash register, more and more functions started getting piled on to this sort of very foundational piece of technology in the store. So you started seeing things like inventory management and even things like workforce management, clocking in, clocking out, occurring at the till. But for a very long time, it was still a thing that sat in the store. Until the 1970s, right? Where, you know, some of us are old enough to remember the client-server days where you might actually have a green screen, but everything was going to be managed at host. Sometimes there would be a server in the store. Usually there would be some sort of resiliency and failover, but there was a lot of stuff happening in mainframes and ultimately in client-server. So if you think about the idea of maybe going to the cloud in the modern era, what's old is new again. There was a time that we didn't have that much code in the stores, and we might be coming to that moment again. So that's the point you were in the 1970s, and then in the 1980s, of course, you had the development of PC-based point of sale. and all of a sudden all that code went right back into the store. And that's where we are today. With the development of cloud-based solutions, you now have the opportunity to think about two things. One, that you don't have to have all that stuff in the store anymore. Number two, and this is where it's really exciting, we can talk about unified commerce. Today we're very siloed still, right? Whatever's happening in the store lives in a stack that sits in the store, but we have e-commerce, we have mobile commerce, we have social commerce. Wouldn't it be nice? I'm sorry, I was told to move further back. I apologize. Can you hear me now?
It's better now.
Okay, I apologize. So, thank you for that. So, with the evolution of unified commerce, we now have digital channels. We have social, mobile, and web commerce. And wouldn't it be great to have the store systems of the future easily interoperable in the same cloud environment? That's what we think at AWS is really the future. And I'd like to see if Greg's data bears that out. So one of the ways this starts working is with the advent of Internet of Things. Imagine that you had your solutions in the cloud, and you had the ability to do a principled apportioning of functionality, a lot of it in the cloud, but you know that some of it has to be locally available. Think about running a credit card swipe, or perhaps needing to do loss prevention, some things that you always want on. The idea here is with the Internet of Things, you can actually decide some things will be in the cloud, some things will be on the edge, some things will be in a device that you manage via the internet. But the key takeaway here is that with small amounts of serverless code, even when the network or the cloud is unavailable, you can still keep running transactions. And so the exciting possibility for the future is that we can actually go back to a world where only the things you really need to do in the store require store technology, and everything else you can manage from the cloud. So there's a couple of things to consider, and Greg and I are going to talk about this a little bit more. Not every store environment is a great fit for the cloud today. Some of the things you want to keep in mind is latency, right? How fast is the cloud able to deliver functionality? Failover and resiliency. If the network is not available, if the cloud is not available, what happens, right? How do you handle that? Security is a big issue. I think all of us have the scars of PCI and PII and GDPR on our backs to know that you must always consider that when thinking about changing the way you manage and being a good steward of your customers' data. Migration and change management are important. This is a new way to do things. It's not natural to every retail organization. Changes the way you deploy technology, changes the way you run your stores. But one of the great things for all of those things to consider is that you get massive improvements in agility. Realistically, you can change, deploy, mutate, not just your technology, but even the way you run your business much more quickly. And finally, the total cost of ownership is much, much lower when you move to the cloud. So the migration to the cloud for most retailers really starts with a project. Find a simple function that you can decompose and take out of the store, but progressively decompose each store function into a service that you migrate to the cloud. Now, on one side, you'll be retiring a lot of technology debt and saving a lot of money. You can reinvest that in new solutions that can really help you reinvent your retail organization. This is the path that AWS recommends to retail clients across the world, and we believe is really the future of retail. But to get some sort of more empirical support for that proposition, or to investigate a little bit further, let me turn it over to Greg Buzak from IHL to look a little bit at the data around adoption. So Greg?
Thanks. Can you get the clicker?
Oh, sure.
Great.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Thanks, Robbie. You guys hear me okay? I've got, third day, it's actually fourth day for me, trade show voice, so I'm struggling through this. But I give you guys credit. Last day of the show, after lunch session, you came in here. So if anybody dozes off, I won't have a problem with it, but thanks for being here. So the biggest news, I guess, right now of the show and what's going on is that optimism's back in retail. We had a year where we had a term that got coined called retail apocalypse that was totally false. but it made for a great headline. And as journalism became more about clicks than it came about real news, what happened is we had 16 large retailers that were starting to scale back that represented over 50% of all store closings, but that became basically synonymous with the entire industry. So we created a report called Debunking the Retail Apocalypse. If you go to our website, ihlservices.com, we looked at 1,800 retailers. And basically, what's the net result? We're up 4,000 stores in 2017 in North America. And actually, that growth is higher for 2018. So that optimism is back. And I'll talk about the specifics here a bit. But here in this chart, if you look at this study that we do every year with RIS News, that food FDC is food, drug, convenience, and mass merchant market. We're expecting, it was 5.6% growth in the blue bar in 2017. Expectations are 7.2% for growth in 2018. In the general merchandise categories, which we have as department stores, specialty hard, specialty soft, you know, if you read the news, the death of the mall, all this sort of stuff, no, these 120 retailers told us they're going to be up 5.3% as their expectation for next year. And then the hospitality segment's strong as well, particularly in fast food, where they're growing fast. So they're growing number of stores very quick. IT spend is also up, both at the enterprise level. And you can see specifically that the tier 2 retailers, which are actually heavy in the specialty stores, is up 7.1% growth in 2018 over 2017. So those of you that have known our study over the years, we did some research last year and found that there's really a bifurcation that's happening in the industry. There are retailers that really understand that they have to transform themselves, and they've got to do 3 things right away. They have to get to a single view of the customer data across channels, a single view of the inventory information and the order information across channels, and then they need to update their point of sale. You need to do those 3 things as the foundational components that you can add everything else to in the store. Those people that are doing that are growing their growth rate's about 50% higher than the average retailer. And we're going to talk a little bit about that data more here. So when you look at IT spend growth per segment, the key drivers, once again, are the food, drug, convenience, and mass merchants. Now, Walmart's going to be a big driver of that, but you also have Target, the dollar stores as well that are driving, keeps popping out, driving the tech spend and the tech spend growth there. I will tell you something that's really fascinating in the study that we did on fulfillment is that the guys who are expanding faster than the industry are 80% more likely to be doing fulfillment by third party. They've realized that they do pallets really well. They do cases really well. They don't do eaches very well. It's a very laborious process to pull one of something and be able to ship that out. So a lot of investment in looking at front-forward fulfillment centers, third-party fulfillment centers in the food, drug, convenience, as well as click and collect type of things there. So general merchandise is about the same expected spend in store and enterprise, and then in hospitality it's a little bit higher at the enterprise than at the store. Cloud spending, about 31% of the software budget is now on cloud spending. The most interesting piece of this is the number that's going into store systems that's growing. 31% of all store system sales are now in cloud-based solutions, which is a huge jump from where we were 2 years ago. And we're going to talk a little bit about some limiting factors that are holding this down that could be higher in terms of availability of bandwidth in the malls and some of the mall covenants that are preventing retailers from going faster to the cloud as a limiting factor to this. So, but BI analytics, certainly e-commerce makes a lot of sense in the cloud, sales and marketing solutions in the cloud, but that store systems number is really one that's grown from in the teens, in the low teens in recent year to much higher. When you look at it by statistics, the one that stands out, and I'll try to do it on this side, really, is what's happening in the store systems in Tier 1. This was 11% 2 years ago, so we've doubled the percentage of the budget that's now in the cloud. for store systems there. And really what that comes down to is everything from point of sale that we're going to talk about today, but the workforce management solutions, the local store delivery, the DSD, the inventory stuff down to the store level is being managed in the cloud now, because we can get to that one single version of the truth of the customer data, the inventory data, et cetera. That's more valuable than having that information at the store level by itself. So the central system of all this stuff is this enterprise order management system. Everything builds off of that, and what we've seen is many retailers are making decisions on their point solutions off of that. So the first point of refusal in every deal is whoever the enterprise order management solution is that's in place there. So if you're going to add merchandising on top of it, who do we have for OMS? That becomes the base part of that. So we talked about doing how they had to have the order management solution, single view of the order, single view of the customer. POS is third, and that's why we're seeing this big bump to POS in the cloud. So this is our cloud forecast, and I know I jumped right from this one thing going forward. POS in the cloud, that we're literally looking at 3 different lines here. So the blue line is the small retailers. The red line is the larger retailers, the tier 1 or more than 50 stores, and the green line is the composite growth. So we're projecting a CAGR of 18% over the next 5 years through 2021, because of the fact that it's more important for you to have that single view of the customer, single view of the order, and updated point of sale, and having that in a single solution. That's the only way that you can combine the channels and see that somebody's been looking something online, they come in the store, and you have a single view and you can deliver it from any way it makes sense for her to get it. And so it's a big change from what we've seen traditionally. And there are going to be certain segments that are better for that, and I think we're going to go into some questions now and talk about little things. Oh, and I guess we should talk about, there's a white paper on this too. So on our website, if you just go to ihlservices.com, to go to research, go to the bottom, and it's there called A Case for Cloud.
So that's great data, Greg. I mean, you and I have been talking about POS hosted or cloud or not in the store for maybe 15 years, right? What do you think are the primary drivers for this change?
The single biggest need, obviously, is the need for the single silo. You have to have one version of the truth. You need to be able to do things. 80% of all purchases are researched online. You're looking at it online, they're pulling up the inventory online, and then they're coming into the store. If there's a disconnect there, you have out of stocks. We categorize out of stocks as basically somebody comes in willing to buy, and they left without buying that item for some reason other than the price. I came ready to go, but I couldn't get it. So it's locked up, it's not available, et cetera, like that. The ability to have accurate inventory, to be able to meet things, that's a huge part of the customer engagement. How many of you went shopping before NRF and did some shopping for stuff before you went to NRF? How many of you encountered out of stocks when you go to do that? We all have, and got to go to multiple stores. In fact, we found in electronics, 1 in 3 customers comes in to buy something and leaves without buying it. At least one item that they went in to buy. I mean, that's just unacceptable today when you can go online, have it delivered in 2 days or 4 hours, you know, that you're going to get it. So my expectation in the store was, we used to have to shop, now we have to want to shop in a physical location. And if that's the case, being in stock on the things I want to buy is absolutely paramount to the customer experience that will keep me coming back to your store. So those are the things that you've got to do, and it's why you got to get to that single version of the truth.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me that what you're saying is that the real driver for POS in the cloud is the creation of unified commerce. Ultimately, that's the reason you need to do it.
Well, it's the customer experience. It gets back to that have to shop versus want to shop type of thing. If there's an office supply retailer that I will never go in again that has anything on an ad, because it's never in stock when I get there. And it's just the reality of it. That out of stock position when I go to the store, because the systems are not integrated there, is just untenable as a consumer. My time's valuable. I don't want to waste it.
So if the original premise is true that you're deconstructing POS to things that could be sent to the cloud like inventory, I suppose some things still have to stay local more often than not, or have to be always available, like being able to run a transaction on a credit card, which means, I guess, that some segments might be better suited than others for that migration.
Well, I think it comes down to speed, bandwidth, availability, so speed of the transaction, but there's also other things that have to happen in the store. So if you're in a supermarket, for instance, you're going to have deli, you can't necessarily have set up in the cloud what that price is going to be. You're going to do that in real time at the store, and you can't take the risk that you got a label, you put a label on that system, and the comms are down, so you can't ring up the roast beef that you just bought because the code didn't. So in those cases, but you're also dealing with in those segments where the speed of the transaction is literally, they're making decisions on scanners and printers based on milliseconds of time saved in a transaction. You can't have a slowdown in comms there. I'm a huge proponent of software-defined WAN. I think it's an incredible technology to help in that case, but you just can't be network dependent when things. I like to use this term, ice cream melts. I mean, it does. If there's something wrong and you can't ring up the transaction, that ice cream just sits in a cart and just melts away, and that's a loss for a supermarket. When you make 0.8 cents on the dollar, that's a big loss. So I don't see cloud POS being a big thing in like dollar stores or in fast front-end checkouts. But when you're talking about department stores, specialty stores, drug stores, where the average transaction is 2 to 3 items, it's not a huge fast pace. We've got to take security tags off. We've got to fold items there. It's not a big performance problem. And those are the areas where you can go to a cloud-based solution. And usually you have a hybrid solution where you have an offline mode that's available at the fat client at the store that can still do PLU, or you can still do your credit, even if the link goes down there. So.
Right. So I'd mentioned Internet of Things. So the development of the ability to have serverless technology and manage the rest over the internet seems like it might be a way to address some of those fears of failover and resiliency. But in some fast-moving consumer goods areas, it might kind of overwhelm the system. I hear you saying that may not be a good place for it, but luxury or apparel or specialty might be.
Well, it depends on what you want to do. You know, some of the same fundamental technologies that are cloud-based for the core things you can do as edge computing now in the store. So let's say you want to do RFID and you want to track something and you want to track it every second there, but you've got limited bandwidth. There, you don't want to be pushing all of that data. It doesn't make sense. You got 25,000 items in the store. It doesn't make sense that every second you're sending 25,000 items up there. You just want to know what moved during that time period. So you need some processing there at the store to process through. You can still have the core solution in the cloud, but a lot of that data-intensive stuff can happen right there at the store on the edge.
Right. I do see also that your data indicates that tier 2 and 3 retailers, which are really mid-sized as compared to the very largest retailers, seem to have an adoption that's enormous, almost double tier 1. So the size of the enterprise seems to matter a lot.
It does, but part of that's culture. So usually if a retailer gets to 50 stores, they can get to 500 stores very quickly, and they rapidly expand there, and it's great to just turn the dial and add users, add stores, etc. So getting to about $500 million, 500 stores roughly, is you want one vendor that you're working with for all of your solutions. But then when you get to about $500 million, you start looking at best of breed technologies that are required for those tweaks to get you to $1 billion, $1.5 billion, and then you start going away from the single vendor approach there. And then somewhere between $2.5 billion to $5 billion, all of a sudden it says we're too big to manage from the best of breed in most cases. We got to go back to that single vendor again to be the one throat to choke, because if we don't, we've just got too many projects, too many things to go. So it's both segment and size that determines that. So the tier 2 guys grow extremely fast, and cloud by far is the best solution to be able to do that. When you're adding 100 stores a year, because you've got a fast-moving concept, you can't do client-server very fast and very well.
Right. Well, it's interesting that that's a very kind of vendor-specific way of looking at that phenomenon. But we see a doubling in a couple of years, right, from 10 to 20% of tier 1 retailers looking at cloud POS. Do you think that the development of microservices and being able to decompose things helps there?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I think it has to do with you've got to define specifically what you're going to host and what's going to be in the cloud. And what pieces you're willing to accept there. So you can still, even in those fast volume things, you can put a RAM disk in that local point of sale where you have the pricing for your items in there. So you can just scan and it just looks like it's going through there. You download once a day, you get all the PLU and its resident memory, and you can do it very fast, but all the back-end processing for the sales, the totals, and all that sort of stuff being in the cloud. It's just you don't want to. I don't think you want to do that in a Kroger store the day before Thanksgiving, to be doing cloud-based point of sale there. I think you're asking for problems in that case. But if you're doing it in a specialty store or a department store or something like that, you can have all the latest prices and all that stuff resident in there and do everything else in the cloud. Certainly the cross-channel stuff, I don't have it in the store, I need to check out inventory somewhere else, or I need to ship from a central warehouse. You can do all that stuff by the cloud.
Do you think that there's a geographic difference? Does Asia Pac or Europe have a different pace of adoption than North America?
I think it varies by individual country. In Europe, I think overall they're more advanced than we are when it comes to cloud adoption. Certainly Asia is. It's kind of like it's like cell phones, they didn't have copper wire all over the place. So they just went straight wireless, so they have faster cell phones, faster internet, and all that than us. So that adoption is just native. It's almost like, kids that grow up now, they don't think twice about using a tablet. If you got to get to grandma, you got to teach her. Well, the kid can just pick it up and go, and it's just native that way. And it's similar to what's happened with the regional pass.
Right. Well, I think that that's some great insight from Greg in terms of data and adoption. If I were to look at this kind of more broadly, one of the things I would say is that the most important takeaway from today is cloud POS is really integral. It's tightly aligned to the change to unified commerce. Most of the people that we see moving to the cloud for POS aren't doing so just for efficiency's sake. It's to create a better customer experience.
Right.
That end-to-end. You mentioned unification of order, unification of customer, and of inventory, and being able to get to that.
Yeah.
So it seems like that's the real message is that a move to the cloud on POS is really mostly to join POS in the cloud to the rest of the functions that serve the customer.
Right. That created a tipping point that made it mainstream.
Right.
So we now have POS in the cloud as a mainstream solution instead of a fringe solution.
Right. Well, so that from our perspective is a very exciting development. We're getting pretty close on time, so let me go ahead and first of all thank Greg Buzak from IHL Group very much for his insight and participation. And of course, Greg, did you want to mention your website, or did you do that?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry if I didn't. It's ihlservices.com. Both of those reports I mentioned are on there, the Debunking the Retail Apocalypse, one with all the store data, and then the white paper on POS in the cloud. It's just, I think, what is it, we call it, Why the Time is Right, POS in the Cloud, Why the Time Might Be Right.
Right. And I think that our takeaway from AWS is this is the time to experiment. It's a great time to find out what's the art of the possible in this space. It's going to grow fast, and consumer expectation is going to take us there, so better to sort of get ahead of the game and find out now. Yeah. So with that, on behalf of Greg and myself for AWS, I'd like to thank you for your attendance today. If you're interested in learning more about our view on these things, you can go to aws.amazon.com/retail, where there's a lot of great information on this. Oh, and by the way, I should mention that we're giving away an Amazon Echo, or an Amazon Echo Show at 2 o'clock. So if you want to drop your card at our booth and win a show and have a great Amazon experience, we'd appreciate that as well. So with that, thank you very much for your time, and have a great rest of your day.